Hi everyone, it's Rusty here, and if you're planning on going on a long hike, there's a bunch of things that you really have to do first. So let's talk about the top 11 things that you must do before you go on your next long hike. Well, it'd be great if we could just throw on a pack, throw some equipment in, and throw some food into it, and be on our way for a 2-month hike. But I found that's not a good recipe for success. So, here in no particular order are the top 11 things that I think you ought to be doing before going on one of these long hikes. So, let's start with water treatment. Test your water treatment, whatever it is. I was out on a hike in Connecticut and I found that my water filter, I just couldn't force water through it. It's a gravity feed water filter, and the filtering element itself had gotten clogged. It was only a 3-day hike, not that much of a disaster. I was able to kind of sit on the bag and force the water through, but I ended up having to throw that filter away. Either it got frozen or something happened to it, but it just wasn't any good. So fortunately, I did have a backup mechanism with me. So test your filter. Just run if you're using a filter, just run a gallon of water through it. If you're using chemical treatment, make sure that the little bottles are full and that they're still there. They haven't dried out on you or haven't leaked out on you. If you're using ultraviolet light treatment, at least change the batteries. I'm not sure how you can actually go about actually verifying that the ultraviolet light treatment is working. But if there's some way to do it, by all means do it, and be sure to at least put in fresh batteries, no matter how fresh you think the batteries currently are. Have a backup. A good emergency backup would be the chlorine dioxide tablets. I actually don't use them. I found that because I wasn't using them, they were actually getting some water somehow even into the foil packets, and the little tabs were no good by the time I did pull them out. So what I'm going to be using is I'm going to be actually using the Aquamira chlorine dioxide backup, and I'm bringing it with me on that trip. I don't want to bring a spare filter. Just a filtering mechanism wouldn't be too heavy, because I don't know if my system fails. Is it going to be the filter? Is it going to be because I got a bag leak? Or whatever it's going to be, I want to have that a lightweight emergency backup for water treatment. The other thing to consider is your reservoir. Test that and make sure there's no leaks in it. And if you don't use a reservoir, you use bottles, well, then test your bottles, make sure they're still good. A popular bottle type with people out on the trail is the smart water bottles. And here's a tip. If you're going to go into a particularly dry area, you would probably be better off carrying 3 1-liter smart water bottles or whatever than 1 3-liter reservoir. And the reason is, if the reservoir leaks, you're out of luck. Whereas with the bottles, at least if one of them breaks, leaks, is no good anymore, you still have the other 2. Far better to be going around with 2/3 capacity than 0 capacity at all. That's a tip I learned from a hiker in the Grand Canyon. Okay, next is your first aid and hygiene kits. So let's first review, what is the purpose of the first aid kit? Well, it's really to stop minor problems from becoming major problems. I reviewed that in an earlier video. So, you're not going to have absolutely everything that you could possibly need for every particular type of injury out there, but you've got to cover the basics. Band-aids, some kind of antibacterial, an antiseptic, something of that sort. So have those, but go through your kit. You should have a list of what is actually in your kit, supposed to be in your kit. Refresh all the contents. If you've been sitting in there, Motrin for a year, just throw them out, refresh new ones. As a matter of fact, like I said in one of my most recent videos, is I'm just clearing out my kit at the end of every season, and I'll just refresh it at the beginning of the next one. So refresh everything in it and check all the contents, make sure that they're good. Same thing with your hygiene kit. Your hygiene kit should be for oral hygiene, for cleansing, the Perel sort of Germex, whatever it is that you take. So again, refresh and check all the contents of that. And here's another tip. You come across these oxygen absorber packets all over the place. I mean, you'll probably get them if you happen to have any like Mountain House meals or anything like that. Take one of those, dust off the food particles if that's what it came from, and put one of those in each of your kits. It helps keeps things dry, and it's a little tip that I came across on my own. Next is a sleeping pad, your sleeping system, your sleeping pad and your sleeping bag. First, check your sleeping pad for leaks. I went on a hike up Mount Monadnock last year. Amber and Craig and Julie were with me, and I had this pad for Amber, and she told me it was very uncomfortable, and we realized the next morning is because it had a leak and she was basically sleeping directly on the wooden platform. So check your pad. I use a pad that's more like this one here, the second one, the one in the middle there, and the pad and the pillow. Just make sure there are no leaks in it, and repair if possible or replace if you have to. Finally, there's the sleeping bag. Make sure your sleeping bag is clean, and if it's a down one, it's fluffable. It fluffs up very nicely. Use a down cleaner and go by the manufacturer's instructions on how to clean it. I found that I had to wash it out in a big tub. You have to wring it out. You have to be very careful when moving it when it's wet because it can rip the baffles. But with sufficient care, I was able to wring it out, get a lot of dirt out of it, and then air dry it through several cycles, and now it's as good as new. For your shelter, regardless of whether you use a tent or a hammock, test it. And by test it, I mean set it up several times if you have to in order to get used to it, especially if it's new to you and it's a new piece of equipment. Set it up and find a hose and spray it, not directly, not hard, but to simulate a rainstorm, spray water on it to see if there are any leaks. Ensure that all the guy lines are in good condition, nothing is frayed. Ensure you have all the stakes that you need. Now, it wouldn't be a total disaster if you were missing a stake because you could probably use a stick or something out in the woods, but it's kind of annoying, and it would be good to have make sure that you have all your stakes. Again, make sure it's still waterproof. And one of the best ways of doing that is just camp out in your yard with it and have somebody, like I said, hose it, not directly as if you're, the biblical flood, but simulate a rainstorm on top of it. Cooking, well, ensure your stove still lights. Even the Esbit solid fuel tabs, which from what I've read online, really don't go bad as long as you keep them dry. Just make sure whatever package that you've had of them, open one up, make sure it lights. It's easy enough to blow out after it's lit and you see that it's lit. You can just blow it out and you can use it, later on the trail. If you have a jet boil or something like that that's going to be in a canister, make sure that the canister has sufficient fuel in it. Now, you may have to weigh the canister, and for the jet boil stash, I did a little bit more research, and contrary to what I said earlier, it's probably closer to 4 grams per boil, and 1 ounce is 28 grams, so each ounce gives you about 7 boils. So you can count the number of boils you can get by getting the net weight of the fuel in the canister. To do that, you have to know how much the canister weighs, and you can figure that out online by seeing what the gross weight is versus the net weight. I think it's somewhere around 6 or 7 ounces for the 100-gram canister, so I can figure out just by taking the difference between the weight and that the canister weight in ounces and divide by 7, and that's how many boils I'm going to get. Replace your lighters. And if you bring matches, just make sure that the matches are in a waterproof container and that they're still good. The package of them is still good. Replace your lighters. I mean, they're so cheap. I use these. I guess they're called Easy Reach or whatever. I use those. I hate being wasteful, but I just figure it's not worth it. If I've used them out on the trail last year or this year, I'm just going to get new ones. It's a few bucks. and I know that I'll have two fresh ones on me when the first one goes out. And it'd be nice if there are different patterns or something, or somehow you can mark them so you know you're always using one first, so that way you've got a good idea, like when you're halfway through, and when you're starting on the second one, you can know you can throw the first one out, but at least the second one is going to be good for quite some time, so you have some time to replace it. Rain gear, just like the tint, test it, make sure that it still beads. There's a product called Nick Wax. There's probably others. It's good for waterproofing or revitalizing the waterproofness of your rain gear. So try that out. I treated mine recently. My rain gear used to wet out almost instantly, even when I got it from the manufacturer. I was very displeased with it. Well, I gave it one of these treatments recently, and I sprinkled some water on it, and it beat it up nicely. How long that's going to last, I don't know, but I figure it's going to be better than it was before. For batteries, replace your headlamp batteries. It doesn't matter how long that you used it the year before. Again, they're usually AAA batteries or AA batteries or something like that. Just replace them right at the start. And whether you need to bring a spare set or not, that's up to you. It depends on the length of your trip, I guess, and your experience with it. One of the worst pieces of advice that I've ever seen on any hiking channel was, you don't need to bring a headlamp because you can always use your cell phone. And that's true enough. If you're inside your tent and you're looking around for something, your cell phone usually has a flashlight, basically turns on the flash bulb light, and you have a flashlight with it. But if you're out hiking and you're trying to use trekking poles, you're going over a dangerous stretch because you've got caught after dark just through things that occur, a cell phone's not going to cut it. You really do need that headlamp. So definitely have a headlamp with you. Fully charge all your devices. That's your phone, your tracker if you have one, like I have the Garmin tracker. It has a test function on it, so before I leave, I do the test function. I have to do it out in my front yard so it can pick up the satellites and confirm that it's working, confirm that my subscription is still good. And your rechargers. There's nothing worse than having a recharger that has no charge in it, because that's dead weight until you can get somewhere. Make sure you have the right cables and adapters with you. Very frustrating to run through the charger's capacity and say, well, I've got a hostel coming up, and then to find you didn't have anything to plug into the wall, you didn't have the right adapter with you, or you didn't have the right cords to recharge the charger. So remember, not only do your devices need to be recharged, but the charger needs to be recharged any opportunity you get. Your wallet, well, I don't bring my entire, day-to-day carrying around wallet. I have a hiking one, similar to this. It's not that one, but it's something like that. Contents, I always make sure I have my medical insurance card. I have used it. The time I got sunburned on the presidential range, I did have to use that insurance card at the local clinic. A couple checks. Some places, especially like out in the middle of the 100-mile wilderness, there's actually a few places that are within walking distance of the trail. They only accept cash or checks. I bring a sufficient amount of cash. Cash is kind of like a precious commodity. Cash is king. I don't use it unless I have to, but there are just certain times when cash is the best way to go. And of course, have a credit card with you. And what I don't bring with me is a debit card. The protections on a credit card, if you lose it, are a little stronger than on a debit card, so I leave the debit card home. I keep the wallet in a zippered pocket in a Ziploc bag because I know I'm going to sweat. And one thing, I don't want to lose it. I have dropped my wallet once on a trail. Fortunately, I saw it drop and I picked it up immediately, but what a disaster it would have been if I had lost my wallet out on the trail. But by keeping it in a zippered pants pocket, not going to lose it. Keeping it in a zippered Ziploc bag in my pocket keeps the sweat from getting into it and destroying. I mean, it's not going to hurt the money, but it may certainly destroy the checks and become stinky. Review your inventory of all the equipment, every bit of equipment you own. I have a list that I go through. It's so that I can make a conscious decision on every piece of equipment, whether I'm going to bring it or not. I'm not going to bring everything. I own a lot of stuff that I just are good for one type of hike, but not good for another type of hike. But by doing it this way, at least I have to make a conscious decision, and I won't leave anything out by doing that. So go over your inventory. Boots and clothing, well, if you bought new boots, you've got to break them in most likely. Trail runners, I don't know. I have never used trail runners. They seem like they'd probably be very comfortable. Or if you've been hiking for a while and you get the exact same model boot and your experience with it is that they don't need a lot of break-in period, then that's great. My Keens actually don't need a big break-in period. I did break in my newest pair a little bit, and I will be wearing them down south. But make sure that your boots go on some shorter hikes just to make sure that you're not setting yourself up for a bunch of blisters. Be sure your clothes, including your camp clothes, are clean and still fit you. Check for dry rot, especially if you've had like anything with elastic band, like waistband on it, that's been sitting in a closet for a while. You know, stretch them when you hear that noise that it makes. That means that it's dry rotted. You know, just make sure that you're not up against that. Check your camp shoes. If you use flip-flops like I do, that middle section can pull out, which makes them, next to useless. I just buy kind of disposable ones that I can just throw out if they fall apart. But, it's nice to at least start with camp shoes, if they're flip-flops or sandals or whatever they are that are still in working order. Check your pack belt size. My last year's long section hike, by the end of the hike, I actually found that my belt size on my pack was too big. I just couldn't tighten it comfortably because I had lost a good 15 pounds out there, and I had lost many pounds between the time I bought that pack and the time I started that hike. So I actually this year ordered a much smaller belt, and I've checked it out and it fits me now, and I'm probably at my widest that I'll be on this trip. So if it fits me now, at least I'll be able to, it'll still fit comfortably at the end of the hike. Have an agenda. Know what your agenda is. Know what permits are required. On the Appalachian Trail, there are permits required in a few places. Going through the national parks like the Shenandoah National Park, that one's free. The Great Smokies National Park, that one is not free, and I have to figure out still how I'm going to get it out on the trail, because you can only get it 30 days ahead of time, and it's going to be more than 30 days into my next hike before I actually get there. So I've got to look for places along the way where I can actually buy and pay for a permit so that I can attach it to my pack and carry it with me to be nice and legal. You got to know the climate and the terrain that you're going into. Study that. Make sure you have sufficient warm clothes if that's an issue. Make sure you're in sufficient condition to deal with steep climbs if that's what you're getting into. Have someone who will track you. In other words, somebody who knows your agenda. If you're using a tracker like I do, they can log in and see where you are. You can check in with them regularly. Now, when I was a kid, we didn't have this. If you were on a hike, you were basically out of touch with friends and family for days on end. It doesn't have to be that way anymore. And just the way things are nowadays, especially with my, advanced age, I'm not in my 20s anymore. My wife would really like to know exactly where I am each night. So she has my agenda. She has a list of every campsite and every shelter and every hostel that I'm likely to come across. And I can report to her each night, either through text, or if my texting service on my phone isn't working, I can do it through the satellite system. Look ahead and arrange for any shuttles, or at least verify that the shuttles are still running, any that you're depending on. Give them a few days heads up if you're depending on using a shuttle. For example, I will be contacting Homer down in the Roanoke area just to make sure that he's still providing shuttle services, and I'll do that a few days before I hop on a train to go down to Roanoke. I'm going to need a ride from Roanoke up to Daleville. It's not walking distance to get up to the trailhead. So make sure you arrange for those. Those are the top 11 things. I could go on and on and on. This video is actually already long enough. If you think I've missed a very important one, put it down in the comments, and I'll talk to you next time.